Meeting is
I think
March
we're
12th.
live. Hey,
All
everybody.
right.
Welcome in. Welcome into another thing that we do here every Wednesday night at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. You can see Mr. Hollywood over there. I'm going to make you do what you make your guests do and sit there and say nothing for a few beats.
I don't do that anymore. That's the old version. We now
You don't even let them into the room anymore until you do your thing, and then they come in.
That's right.
I remember I had not done your show in a while, and you were going to try to give me the warning about that, and I go, so jump right in. You go, you got it. Okay. This is 50 Toasts. We do this every Wednesday night. We've had some great guests, and I'm very excited about this one. Also, just as a programming note, on Mondays, we're now going to be doing Quick Snaps, the podcast here in this format. And then it's going to become a regular podcast after that. So you can watch it here with us live on Monday, right before the Monday night game. Or you can just wait and get it in your ear holes the way you always have. Check out patreon.com, type in Costaki, and it'll tell you some details about how to support what we're doing and how we thank you back with perks and all that stuff. You can also type in Patreon/Quick and figure out the football podcast version of that same thing. And blah, 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 blah. We're glad you're here, and I'm glad to have, and I don't say this lightly, a national treasure, Jimmy Pardo.
Wow. I'll take it lightly because it sounds like just words. I'm thrilled, and you know this as well as I do, but so that your fans do, or anybody that are mine. That fans is such a weird word, but you know my point is, you and I were scheduled to have. You were doing 50 lunches.
Yes.
And I want to say you and I were scheduled to have a lunch on like maybe March 11th.
I looked it up today. I happen to know. It was, our email was on March 12th about March 13th lunch that didn't happen.
Right. And then March 13th is when the country locked down. Like so you and I were like, maybe we shouldn't go to lunch. And then the country decided, good call, fellas. We're going to follow your lead. Like
that's right. It's so funny, but you were my first cancellation in life, and then there have been a lot since then.
And I think we both thought, like a lot of people thought, like, well, we'll do this in a couple of weeks. It'll be fine. We'll have lunch soon.
I really actually today, because I was debating it in my head, and it's so funny. I said to my wife, like, he was my first member. I was going to go to lunch. And I remember saying to her, like, I'm going to have lunch with Jimmy Pardo and blah, blah, blah. And she looked at me like, you're going to do what? And in my head, I was like, maybe I shouldn't do that. And we had such a tough time scheduling. And I was like, I'm going to go one last time and do a thing and not shake hands. And it's going to be fine. And then you emailed me, I'm not coming. And I was like, that's right.
I can't believe I was the one. Here's the truth. I was diligent, very heavily diligent. Is that a sentence? That sounded Trump-like. I don't know what I just said. I was very, I get diligent about, hey, we should lock everything down. And I wiped everything down in my house every single night. Every night I went around with a Lysol wipe and wiped every surface that could have been touched down. And people are like, it's nobody but you and your family touching that stuff. You haven't left the house. Why are you doing that? I don't know why I thought it was like a nuclear blast and it could possibly land in my home. So when we were supposed to have that lunch, it was all part of it. We can't even leave the house. We can't go anywhere. The world's so.
I know. Yeah. We were on the same page. It's funny. Like, and we actually have used the same thread to set this up. So it's easy to look back and go. And the next exchange was, hey, I'm thinking about canceling everything in April. What are you going to do? We kind of like went back and forth.
Right.
And I said, kind of scarily, I saw it today. I said, yeah, I think I should just shut it down and hunker down for a while, but also I'm mad that they're closing the world and I'm kind of torn. And here's what I think. Why is it going to be better in 6 months? That was on March 12th.
Wow.
And here we are 6 months later, and it was weirdly prophetic. Like, it's not better. It's maybe worse.
But I think it is. That's A. B, I think we kind of thought it would be like the bird flu, right? Where it was like, hey, this is bad. Maybe a little bit worse than that was, where we have to lock down for a little bit. Right. But we got through that, and we didn't shut anything down. We just lived our lives.
Yeah.
And I think we all thought, like, all right, well, let's give this one a few months, and then we'll be back to that. It'll be like the bird flu. And
see, I thought that earlier. I thought like that first couple of weeks of March is when I was having those thoughts. I thought, even Ebola was like the scariest thing in the world. It didn't affect my day-to-day life at all.
Right.
and Mad Cow, and there were like 30 of these, and you're like, it's never been an issue for me once.
Right. Why
And
would this
then I
one
listened
be?
to a podcast of this poor doctor in this small town in northern Italy. He had 400 something people in a small hospital who were too sick to come into work.
Wow.
And they were doing, like triage and deciding who's going to live or die because they only had X number of beds. And they have way more beds per capita than I do. And this is not some little than we do here. And, that's not some little third world country. That's Italy. And that's when I
Right.
go, oh, shit. That's when it first hit me. I didn't know.
Yeah. I know you're connected with the Italians. I know you got a bond with them, and it hit you hard.
Married
I don't know why I'm laughing. That's unfair. It was all. I'm with you. Like, I think people just think, a lot of Americans just think anywhere else is a third world country. Like,
Yes.
well, that's Italy. They're,
Right.
they're dumb, man. They're dumb people. Like, that's Spain. That's France. That ain't us. But it's like, what you don't think they have doctors and hospitals? What are you talking about?
Right. And arguably, depending on where you sit in the socioeconomic spectrum, way better healthcare than we have.
Right. Right. Again, depending where I, of course, I've got wonderful coverage, and I'm good to go.
You with the Hollywood side over your shoulder.
Sure. As I stress every second that I'm awake that I'll get a health insurance for the next year. I'm in great shape. By the way, I have
a questions for you, and I know there's a limited amount of time, so can I dive in? Can I
just say this first? I know that this is called 50 Toasts. So I'm having a non-alcoholic beer. I'm having a Heineken 00 alcohol free, because I haven't had alcohol in 21 years.
That's amazing.
But
21 years.
Summer, what?
Did you spend the first 21 years not drinking, and then 20 something drinking, and then 20? How does this fall?
You know what? That actually plays out kind of similar. Like I don't think I had my first beer until I was maybe a senior in high school, and I had one at a party.
All right.
And then I remember I got drunk once when I was 20 years old. I got hammered, like at a party, and then and then I spent a lot of, maybe the first 10 years of me doing stand-up between 23 and 33, being drunk most nights. And then stopped at 30. I think I was 33 when I finally stopped. And then, so here we are, 21. So yeah, you're it's pretty dead on your math. Although I think you might have added 10 years to my life in your version. But
yeah, that's right. I didn't finish the sentence because I realized I made you 60 something. Like,
yeah. I don't. It's like, well, heads up. I don't know how old you think I am, but I think I look younger than I am. But you want to throw 10 on?
You definitely do. I know.
Thank you very much. I think I look
won't
fantastic.
say because again, you're in Hollywood.
So what ended up happening, Costaki, is I'm a big baseball fan, and I was watching baseball just to have some normalcy during this whole nightmare, and I was seeing all these ads for non-alcoholic beer, and I hadn't even had a non-alcoholic beer for probably 5 years, and I was like, you know what, I'll give this new Heineken one a try, and it's fine.
Yeah, still skunky.
It's still dumb. Like I'm still like it's 50 unnecessary calories, like. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. I guess anyway. So anyway, I'm having this in your show's honor.
I appreciate that, and I didn't expect to discuss this here, but since we're having the conversation, I'm considering doing a rebranding because I don't think the name really works anymore. What happened was I was doing 50 lunches with you, real humans in the world. It gave me an excuse to like meet a friend once a week and get out of the house. And then when the pandemic hit, I go, well, I should do this 50 lunches, but the virtual version. And my first friend that I had on, he goes, yeah, but eating on camera sucks. And he was right about that.
Yeah, it's awful.
So we went 50 toasts, but then like almost none of my friends are drinkers. And when I was in LA, I'm doing it at 6 p.m. anyway. And I've got a toddler. I can't drink anyway. The whole thing is crazy.
Yeah. So what are you going to change it to? 50?
I don't know. I like the concept of 50 lunches so much. Maybe I just go back to that and it's an homage to a thing that was once and will be again and isn't exactly right now. I don't know.
Listen, it's your call. It's not my place to weigh in on this at all. I don't think it's my responsibility. In fact, I hate that you threw it at me. I don't know why this is on my back now.
Certainly is not, but cheers. Cheers.
Cheers to you, sir.
Can I ask you one question if it's not too personal? And if
ask me 1,000 questions.
Don't fuck myself. Is it harder to not drink when the life is fucking weird? Is that a factor? No.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, it's been 21 years, so it's like not a problem ever. The only time for me it was really ever a problem in the 21 years of being sober is going to like school, my son's school functions, or going anywhere where I don't know anybody. And in the old days, I would hide with a bottle of beer in my hand, and I would drown myself, and then I would numb myself to what was happening, and I thought I was fun and charming. Now I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do, and I wish I could have a beer to take the edge off, but I cannot.
I hear you. I'm totally familiar with those situations, and I suck at those too. Sober or not.
Dude, and you know what? For us as comics, and luckily my wife is a comic, and she understands this, and so when I kind of shut down at those events, like we as comics have a shorthand. Like we know how to talk to each other. We also know that if you say something quote unquote offensive, I know you're kidding.
Right.
Yet if I say that at a school function, whoa, hey.
Right.
And it's like, remember what I do for a living? Remember when I hosted the talent show? Remember, that was still me, guys, still me. Yet if another parent makes a joke like that, it's like, they all laugh at it like it's the funniest thing in the world. And I'm like, so you're really a racist then? Okay, I see. So it's weird. Especially as long as you and I have been doing stand-up, how we just know how to finish each other's sentences. We know where people are going. Right. And it's just weird. And I'm not that I'm elite in any way, but just weird being around non-comics for a long period of time. In that kind of
it's not an elite thing. It's we've all been through the ringer in the same way thing. And there's a certain sort of fraternity of it's okay to say whatever you want in this space.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. Right.
You know, a few times I've been with comics where I, in my head, go, probably not gonna spend more time with this guy. That seems like maybe there's no humor to that statement. But for the most part, we bust each other's balls. We, those of us that get along, we have fun, and that's difficult to do with a guy who just works 9 to 5 with a lunchbox. And again, I'm not putting that down. I envy that guy's consistency. You know what I mean? Like, the normalcy. But anyway, that's what long-windedly. No, this is fine during this time not to drink.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. Yeah, the other thing that for me, and maybe I shouldn't admit this in public, is I care so much less about other people's kids than my kids that it's hard for me to engage in a conversation for a long period of time about kids broadly. I don't know.
I can't give too many details because it'll really pinpoint the person. But so I'll just say Bandcamp. It's nowhere near that. But this mother was telling me, she really found her calling with Bandcamp and blah blah blah. And I just remember and I'm a person that I do care about other people, but it was like I just don't care. I don't. And it's like, oh, is that right with the Bandcamp? Like I just pretending to be interested and then not. I know that makes me sound like an a-hole, but
that's the problem with those moments. I'm totally with you. Oh,
yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. I also couldn't understand the earnestness that it was, how it was being expressed. Like, we're not really having this conversation. Like, it just seems so like a Hallmark movie-ish to me. It was very bizarre.
All right. So you're a pioneer. You are a podcast pioneer.
Sure. Is that the first of the many questions that you promised?
I have many questions about this process.
Is this how it would have gone at lunch? Would you have had a list of questions at lunch, or would we have just talked like human beings?
Both.
Okay, good.
Both.
Yes. By the way, I think about that. You posted a picture once of Village Pizzeria. You had a slice of pizza and a beer next to it. And I think about that photo.
That's right.
Almost weekly, I think about that photo because I so love Village Pizzeria. And that particular slice looked fantastic. And I thought about it today as I was leaving. I had an appointment earlier, and I was driving home to meet you for this. And I was like, oh, that photograph of that pizza. Like, it was like, and so now I imagine if that's where we had met for lunch, you would have had your questions next to your slice of pizza. Yes, I started podcasting in 2006 to answer your question.
No, that's not my question. I want to hear about the process on your side of the desk, because this is interesting to me that you are, I don't know how to say it. I do think you're a treasure. You're freaky good at what you do. You have a podcast that is kind of the goal of all of the characters in the world to get this sort of traction and have, sustained success with something that's kind of outside of the purview of regular show business, right? That's kind
I don't know if it is anymore. I think with Rogan and Corolla and Conan, and Dak Shepard. I was like, they're kind of bringing it into regular show business, but
Yeah, these things are all
certainly
blurry now, right?
when when I started, yes, you're right. It was way outside of it. It was like, so you're not in radio? No, I'm not radio. I'm doing a podcast. It's kind of a radio show, and it's an hour a week, and it's on the internet. Yeah, but so is it your stand up? No, it's not my stand up.
Yeah.
Like, so you're right about that, but I think and I appreciate what you said about people, wanting to replicate what I do, and I think that was true to an extent for a while. But then again, all these names that I just mentioned passed us by, because they came in with built-in audiences because they were already famous. And
Right. They already were doing a thing. Right.
yeah, and and when I started in 2006, I was able to build it on my Bob and Tom following and some other radio stations that liked me, like they would have me on to promote it, and then my co-host Matt Belknap, who really deserves a lot more of the credit that he gets, because he was the one that approached me about doing this thing. He had a website called thespecialthing.com, which was an alternative comedy website. And so we kind of had an audience from that. We had the audience from kind of the Bob and Tom world and my stand-up world. So we at least had a built-in audience when we first started. So we were able to build on something, but we weren't building on, I was once on news radio and Fear Factor, or I'm hosting a talk show for 25 years. We built on me hoping to Christ I'd get 30 people at a comedy club audience. You know what I mean? So
that's why it's such a great story. And that's why so many, especially in the modern world, like, I don't want to over explain this, but people might know that in the old days, you kind of stood around in line if you were a comic. And if you did the Tonight Show, you were famous the next day.
Yes.
And that's over. You can do the Tonight Show and be completely unknown the next day. The good news is there's this whole other universe of paths to kind of have your dreams come true. And they're not guarded by a single guy who decides if you get there or not. And this is one of the many modes. And you're it's true. You're a real pioneer in that world. And so it's a great story. I think people who are in podcasting and comics broadly, and even people beyond that universe, they're fascinated with how this came to be out of nothing.
You're right. It was interesting. And I thank you for that. And I know how hard it would be now if I tried to jump into it now. Like when I see these young comics or even just working comics that are panicked during this pandemic, I certainly wouldn't slow anybody down from trying to do something creative. But it's not going to be Dane Cook on MySpace where it's like, I'm going to start a podcast and then I'll make money and I'll be successful. It's like there's a lot of it out there now, man. I am so
almost
grateful
none.
that I started. What'd you say?
Almost none. Right?
I don't know how anybody would find an audience. Like if you're just a guy who's funny, you know what I mean? Anymore. I'm very grateful that Matt Belknap came to me in 2006 and said, let's start this thing. And I was able to get in before the rush of famous people did. And I was able to build an audience. Thank God.
So you're being modest because it's also merit-based. Your show's crazy good. It's Never Not Funny. For those of you, if you haven't stumbled onto Jimmy Pardo somehow, do that. Never Not Funny is it's a pleasure, top to bottom.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful that people were kind enough to come on my show early on too, where we sat around my dining room table and they would be a guest going, so we're just what are we doing here? And then they would see how professional I ran it, and then they would, when it was released, there was an opening theme song, and I welcomed people in, and people were like, hey, this is good. I learned a lot, honestly. I learned a lot from Steve Dahl and Gary Meyer, who I grew up with listening to in Chicago. And I learned a lot from our friends, Bob and Tom, who would have guys like you and I on a regular basis. Right. And I got to see how they did it. And then you witnessed in the commercial breaks, how they handled themselves. And so I from the get-go, I was like, let's treat this like it's a radio show. Let's take this seriously. And
you've always had a little bit of sort of a natural hosty quality about you. Was that sort of just baked into you from always?
Yeah, I think so. And I probably just didn't know how to get into radio. You know what I mean? Like I probably, wish somebody would have come to me in 1998 and said, do you want to do mornings in Peoria? And I would have said, yes. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't know how to get into it. And, but I always dug it. I always idolized all the, the good DJs in Chicago, the good radio personalities in Chicago. And then the people that we've met on the road, and you and I have met some of the best. Bob and Tom are great. And Tom Barnard up in Minneapolis is great. And if I'm leaving people out, I'm sure I am.
You've mentioned three. You probably left somebody out.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I think those are the three. And but there's also a lot of junk. You know what I mean? We've encountered a lot of junk in our life where it's like
Sure.
I literally would get in my rental car and go, seriously? I'm struggling to get anybody into the comedy club, and I'm on the freaking Tonight Show, and this guy's making a living. Like, it would just infuriate me.
Right.
And how is the program director not chasing me out to my car to offer me that time slot? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I would think from time to time. And but here we are.
If it makes you feel any better, none of those guys are making a living anymore.
Well, that's a good point.
Right?
Well,
You had a tough run of things.
that's true.
Oh
That's
my
true.
goodness. So, all right. So tell me more about process. Like, I'll just dive in with a bunch of the questions I have.
What does that mean? Tell you more about process.
Like, what kind of guest is good versus not so good for your particular? Because you have a very specific slice of the entertainment pie that you guys do on your thing, and I wonder, do you have guests? Like, I know you're a giant music fan. Do you have stories of like a guy that you've loved your whole life and you had him on the show and he just didn't fit the show?
We've never really had anybody like that. But we've had comics that, amazingly successful, and they're great comics that just maybe being free form conversation isn't their bag, or the guy who, and I've certainly been guilty of this on the road at certain radio shows where they unnecessarily take over. It's like, dude, this isn't a morning thing I make up any city in Wichita. You don't have to steamroll me. I know what I'm doing, and I'm gonna guide you through a nice conversation. And that guy's so used to, I gotta get up, I gotta promote, I got shows, and it's a calm down.
Right.
So we've had that. We've been very lucky in that. We were just talking about this the other day. As a matter of fact, that like the clunkers have luckily been few and far between, and even the clunkers are like, yeah, but that still was funny, and that was fun, and we got that great story out of it, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any. I mean, obviously, there's a few that have completely crapped the bed, but I don't feel fair.
I don't want names. I just want to know, like, their types. So is there a type that you're like, I don't want that kind of thing anymore?
Boy, is there a type where I don't want that? I mean, there's comics that their publicists pitch them all the time, and I'm just like, I know it's not going to be a good fit. I know, because I can't even lie and say, hey, one of the best, great, even though they're successful comics that are maybe even more successful than me, but I can't have them on and go, oh, you love this guy, you've seen him, because I don't believe it. Right. I'd rather have a nobody on that I believe in than have a famous guy on just to get a couple more clicks.
Right. Sure. That's my next question. So you must have the opposite. You have somebody you're like, I don't know how this is going to go. And then it was fantastic.
Oh, we've had many of those where it's like, all right, let's get through this. Let's see what happens. And the second that it's over, we all kind of look at each other like, could you believe how great that was? And then that person may become a regular. I can't wait to have them back. I can't wait to write that person's publicist and say, thank you so much for pitching that person or being so tenacious on booking them. But yeah, but again, there's also been a few where it's like, how's everybody doing? Everybody all right? We got through it? Okay, we're good. Anybody hurt? And then, we move on.
Now I always ask this question of club owners because I was fascinated because what's the balance sort of between like booking the guys you love versus the guys who do well in the room, kind of like, because you have whatever, not to throw anyone under the bus, like maybe an Andy Kindler type who you just adore and maybe doesn't sell as many tickets as whatever Screech from Saved by the whatever that, again, no disrespect to either of those guys. How do you do that?
How do I, or how does the club owner?
How do you do it? I already know the club owner.
You know what? We just don't anymore, really. We don't. We tried to compete a little bit early on when the comedy podcast boom happened and all these people were getting these bigger guests. And it was like, oh, we got to get the bigger guests too. We got to compete. We got to, even if they're not our cup of tea, we got to get them on for listens. And but it's like, you know what? That's not our show. That's not our show. That's not our audience. And, it's cool to talk to some of those people, but at the same time, it's like, that's not going to do anybody any favors. So, now it's got to really be somebody that I'm interested in, and which is an awkward response to a publicist where it's just, thank you for asking, but we're going to pass right now, which I know people say when Jimmy Pardo's publicist reaches out and wants to
Right.
book
Yeah,
him.
we all have that. Right.
Right. And it's weird being on the other side of it and telling somebody and then knowing that person goes back to, hey, what'd Pardo say? Yeah, they're going to pass right now. What the F? Like, so.
Jimmy, who?
Yeah,
Right.
no kidding. I was doing that guy the favor. Why is he telling me no? Yeah. In fact, we just got a request the other day that there was a miscommunication, and this person, when I say just the other day, by the way, it's probably 4 years ago now, but it was a miscommunication where I did not want to book that person, and then we ended up booking that person, and that person ended up being great. So.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah, it was weird. I'm not going to say who that was because it's not fair to say, hey, I didn't want to book that person.
Tom Simmons?
It was Tom Simmons.
Just guessing.
It was Tom. It was not Tom Simmons. I invited Tom on.
It was.
The other one of our mutual friends I have to get on is Danny Bevins. I have not had Danny Bevins on, and boy, Danny is amazingly funny. And I have to. He's one of my my white funny guys that I have to get on. And sadly for him, there's a lot of us.
Yeah, there are. There certainly are. And we're all available.
Yeah, right. And that's exactly right.
So what about friends? How do you do? I mean, it seems, again, I don't know exactly what's happening in your head, but if I were you, I would think the perfect guest is a good friend of mine who's super funny and understands the form. And
yes.
You have them on over and over and over and over again, right?
Yeah, we did that very early on for the first few years. We'd had people on a more regular basis than they certainly are now. Now it's maybe once every 6 months or once a year for people because just the way, it's just the vibe of the show, how it's changed, and you want to rotate it. And again, I don't want to be guilty of, and we're trying hard. We don't just want to be. My show's already 4 white dudes talking, and you bring out a 5th person. Here's another white dude. That's a lot, man. So, but I'm with you in that. Yeah, and that's what made my show successful early on, was having, consistently funny friends on. That people that I'm lucky that are funny, and that, I knew that if they sat down behind the microphone, that they would be good.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on in the every 9 years, I think, is the current cycle.
It is. I'm embarrassed on how often you're on. In fact, I was just thinking about it today. Like, it's been a while since Costaki was in the studio, and now we find a date. So yes, agreed.
All right. I'm jumping to a whole new thing.
Okay.
MCA Records.
Yes.
What did you do? This was your last day job. Is that right?
Yes, I was. So I managed record stores from '84 to '87. I either managed or assistant managed record stores right out of high school. I didn't go to college. I ended up going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which I still worked full time as managing a record store while I went to school. And so I did that immediately out of high school, managing record stores, and then in I guess it would have been late 87. Yeah, late 87. I was managing a record store in Naperville, Illinois, and doing community theater and stuff like that. And the head of the Chicago branch of MCA Records came in, and he would come into my store. I didn't know it at the time. I since learned it once I started working for him. It was near his house, so he was able to say, "Hey, I got to stop by that Oranges and see what's going on over there, Oranges Records and Tapes." And little did I know, it's like that was his excuse to go home early. Like that was his excuse to go, "Hey, I'm going to go golfing, and I'm going to pop into that record store so that there's record that I did it." And but he came in once, and I was talking to the guy, and he's like, "Boy, you really know your stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I mean, the truth is, my record store didn't do it. That particular store location didn't do a lot of business, so I was able to spend time reading the back of albums and knowing liner notes and knowing everything. And the store was immaculate because I have OCD. Also, nobody was ever in there dirtying it up. So it was a beautiful looking store. The displays were great. And he's like, "Hey, I have an opening. I'd like you to come in and interview to be our jazz specialist. You know anything about jazz?" And I learned one thing at Second City was yes and. So I said, "You got it. Yes, I do. I know a lot about jazz." And so I went and bought a suit. Didn't know that people just wear shorts to a record company office, but went and bought a suit and went to the interview. And it turns out I didn't know enough about jazz to get that job. And he said, "Hey, you're not right for this, but I think I'm going to have an opening in the sales department soon. Was that something you'd be interested in?" And I said, "Yes, please keep me in mind." And sure enough, about a month later, he came into the record store and said, "Hey, do you want that job?" And I said, "Yeah, let me just get back to you tomorrow." And he goes, "What do you mean get back to you tomorrow?" I go, "Well, I got to give my 2-week notice." He goes, F that. And he picked up the phone and he called my boss because MCA was above record stores. You know what I mean? So he called my boss and said, "Hey, just letting you know, I just hired Jim Pardo to be a sales rep. And so Friday's his last day."
Wow.
And I started at MCA the next Monday. And I think it was late '87 that happened, and I quit in July of '89. So it was almost 2 years that I worked there, and I was not good at my job. I was not good at it. I started doing open mics in '88, so that kind of took my focus away from MCA.
Right.
I also was way too honest, and I was not. I should have had a different position there. Like I should have been a display person or an account rep and not a sales rep, because I just was like, I spoke up in meetings, which wasn't allowed. I forget who I said it about, but I remember saying, "We are talking about the Little River Band in '88, right?" Like them saying we're expecting big things, and I was like, "You got to be! What are you talking about? Big things? They haven't had a hit in 7 years." Like, and then after one meeting, my boss Jim said, "Hey, we don't say stuff like that in meetings." Oh, okay, and then I just really started using my office as a place to book gigs,
Right.
around Chicago and stuff like that, and talk to other comics. And it was obvious that I was not doing my job very well. And my boss came to me one day and he gave me an ultimatum. This was in July of '89. And he said, "Hey, you got to really decide, what you want to do here. Do you want to continue here with MCA, or do you want to be stand-up comic? Because it's obvious that the two of them are, you're not doing your job." And he wasn't wrong. And I said, "All right, you know what? Let me go home and think about it. Let me talk about it." I probably said with my mom, because I would always go to my mom and dad for this kind of advice, certainly in my early 20s.
That's cool.
And I came back the next day and said, I'm gonna do stand up. So I'm gonna give my 2-week notice. And he literally was like, he didn't say it, but his face said, "You got to be shitting me. What are you talking? This is the greatest job in the world. You're making a ton of dough. You're hanging out with rock stars. You know what I mean? You called your own hours, and you're going to walk away from this." And everybody in the office had come to see me perform maybe 2 to 3 weeks earlier at the Barn of Barrington, which was a suburb of Chicago.
Oh no!
And they saw me bomb a bomb that maybe to this day still one of the worst bombs I ever had.
I can tell that's where that was going.
Right? It wasn't even like, well, at least that joke worked. It was a bomb. And like one of those bombs where, like, then on Monday, they all had to just either avoid eye contact with me or lie to my face about, "Hey, great job on Friday. Great to see you. That was great."
Right.
And so then it all disappeared, and they probably all went to themselves, "Well, that little hobby's not going to last. This guy sucks." And so the day that I gave my notice to Jim in his office, and then we had our board meeting, or not board, a conference room meeting, not a board meeting, conference room meeting, where he said, "Hey, before we start with everything, just want to let you know that Jim Pardo here is let me know that he's going to he's given his 2-week notice. He's going to pursue stand-up comedy." And just the looks and like everybody, just the silence, the whiplash people got from how quiet they got. Was like,
funny.
I can't imagine what they all said after that. Like I walked out of the meeting just going, "He's out of his mind, right? What are you? This guy's so awful. Why is he making this decision?" And
I love that.
yeah, it was.
Now, what was the job? What are you selling? What?
I'm selling record. I was selling, at the time, CDs were the big thing. So it was CDs. CDs were number one seller, cassette, and then vinyl. And then vinyl was getting pushed out at the time. And I would call up record stores, my accounts. I had my accounts. I had Flipside Records in Chicago was my biggest account. I think they had like 8 to 10 stores. And I would call them up and I would say, "Here's the new releases for this month. How many do you want of each title? How many cassettes, how many CDs, how many albums?" And then, if they needed to reorder or anything, they could either call me or they could just do it directly with the MCA warehouse for catalog items and stuff like that. Or if there was a promotion like, we had something called I don't think it wasn't called Nice Price. That was CBS. It was some other thing, like the low end, the 698 records. If you bought 50 of those, you got some sort of a discount. You know what I mean? Like, so I would contact them. Hey, there's a deal going on this, and how many Tom Petty catalog items can I put you down for? Like, so I would do that. Like, I basically was like I always say, it was the greatest sales job in the world, because again, I'm hanging out with I'm hanging out with Elton John. I'm hanging out with Olivia Newton-John. I'm hanging out with these amazing rock stars. But at the end of the day, I'm still calling people hoping that they're going to buy something. Like, it still was like, I might as well have been knocking on the door hoping to sell, vacuum cleaners. It was still that.
Fascinating.
So yeah, and then I quit, and then, luckily this worked.
Yeah. Right. So go back to the record store era, when you were running a record store. Was that the era when people would come and camp out for concert tickets?
Oh yeah.
That's a very interesting situation, right?
It was, in fact, my store, Oranges Records Tapes in Naperville, people we were a location, I think it was Ticketron. And so we would do Alpine Valley up in Wisconsin was our big venue for rock concerts. And like the Monsters of Rock tour, which I think was 88. Was that 88? I wouldn't have been there for Monsters of Rock anymore if my math. Anyway, who cares? Whatever the big tour was in 87, like people slept overnight out in front for 2 days. Like they'd be there for 2 days. And I would come in, I'd unlock the door, good morning. And then you don't know, like any sort of late night TV stand-up spot or any big theater venue that you might get butterflies on in your stomach. Nothing compares to people waiting in line for concert tickets, and then tickets are going on sale at 10 o'clock. From 9:58 to 10 o'clock, getting panicked about hoping that it shows up on the again, these are late 80s computers, hoping it shows up. The guy's been here for 2 days waiting to get tickets, hoping that everything goes okay. How many do you need? Oh, and I literally have never felt more stressed in my life than that process of the Ticketron tickets.
People who are, I don't know, younger than 35 have no idea what we're talking about, but that was a gigantic cultural phenomenon at the time. Like our little place was called Turtles Records and Tapes. Was like, it was a cultural thing. You would go and keep out, and first row tickets to AC/DC or Rush is coming. We got to go, and it was a big deal, And
it was, people would all, like for your example, people would all be in Rush t-shirts, and somebody would bring a boombox and play Rush music all night long. So it was like its own event before the concert tickets. And then it was very strange because all these people that bonded in line at the, waiting, the guys would get their tickets. All right, man. And then they're done. That friendship's over. They would all just go about their lives. It was like bizarre, like this weird bonding literally ended the second they had tickets in their hand, and then go to their cars and take off.
And there was a clear, there was a pecking order. Like the guy at first in line is going to wind up in the first 3 rows of this concert.
Yes.
And the second guy is going to maybe get on the floor. And then it literally drops that fast.
Yes. Because you have all those computers go all over the city going at the same time.
Right.
And then if you add into, which we did not do very often because I felt guilty about it, but there were a couple times where like an employee would come to me and go, this is the most important concert that I've ever wanted to go to. So we would, at 10 o'clock, how many do you need? We would do 2 right off the top. And then the guy that was in line would get the next set. And so, but I literally, to this day, I feel bad about it. Like, it's just like, but it's like one of those things where like, well, that's part of the perks of having that gig, like that, that employee's here and they get to go see Tom Petty or whatever the hell earlier. Apparently, there's other artists besides Tom Petty, right? I've mentioned him 9 times. But yeah, it was. But your point is that too. Like, you could be in line, you could be 20th in line, and then it's sold out. I'm only 20th. It's like but 20th times 100 computers. Yeah, and there's 20,000 seats. That math doesn't work, but you know my point.
Might be more than 100 computers.
It could. I don't know a lot about computers or tickets for that matter.
So you've had a lot of sexy jobs. These were sexy jobs, right?
They were neat jobs. I was very lucky. I've been very, very lucky in my life that I don't really, even when I worked at a gas station, I worked at the gas station with my friends. And so we did nothing but laugh for the 4 hours after school that I would work at the gas station. So I've been very lucky in that I've had these, always had fun jobs and never really went, oh shit, I got to go to work today. I always enjoyed going.
That's such a blessing. I mean, that's the broadest blessing that we have as comics in whatever form you're doing it is you don't have that, oh, fuck, when the alarm clock goes off the way
Right.
most people do. It's at a deep level. You have a little like, I got an early flight or whatever, but it's not like, it doesn't hurt your feelings to go to work. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I've had some bad shows where my feelings are where I'm sitting.
Might hurt your feelings to leave work.
Oh, I still think about a time that I drove back from Joker's in Dayton, going from the club to the condo, the comedy condo. And on the way, like when you get off the exit, there was a Best Buy and I couldn't even make it to the condo before I pulled into the Best Buy parking lot and sat in my car and sobbed. That's how bad the show was. Like, I just was like, what am I doing with my life? This is the worst. And just sobbing I could just, I see the Best Buy off the highway and just remember sitting there at, it would have been 12:15 at night, or AM in the morning, just sobbing after a second show Friday.
We've all had those. I was an opening act in Jasper, Alabama one night after I had recently gotten my master's degree in political science and decided to go be a comic for a living. And oh man, I cried into the pillow that night. Oof.
It's so funny. And you and I, because we did so many of the same gigs around the Midwest and these one-nighters and all that stuff where you kind of convince yourself that wasn't bad. But if you look back at it, it's like, there's no way that gig went well. There's no way it was okay.
No, that's the thing. And when that's what most people don't know is when you're a new comic, there's this sort of implicit trade that's being made. You're allowed to get better at your craft, and the people who are seeing you are not paying much for this privilege and often don't know there's a show that's going to be there.
Right.
And so there's this crazy thing that's happening where it's a bad situation and a new comic, and it almost never goes well for anybody.
It really, it's funny. I remember I was opening for Paul Kelly once, who's a great comic out of Chicago, and Paul was established at that time. He had been on Showtime. He had done a bunch of stuff, right. and he was a great comic. Even then, this is 30 years ago. This story, and I had a great show, a very rare great show, and so I had a great show, and then Paul Kelly destroyed. And afterwards, an audience member came up and said, "Hey, that's the best show we ever had here." And the person, and I was, "Oh, thank you." And Paul said, "Thank you." And he walked away. And I said, "Wow, that sucks for this place. If that was the best show they ever had." And Paul's like, "What are you talking about? That was the best show they've ever had." And I'm like, Jesus, okay, I guess it was. Like, and I don't even know what side I'm on in this argument, but I know that I'm not comfortable agreeing with him, and I know that he's not wrong. Yet I don't. It just seemed weird to me because it wasn't. It just seemed like it's just a bar somewhere in Ohio.
It wasn't magical, right?
Right.
Right. That's the thing. I mean, you go work at Acme or, there are places that are like built for comedy and people come to see comedy and it's all about the comedy. And then there's a Holiday Inn bar in Vidalia, Georgia, where the softball team came in and they're annoyed there's comedy.
Right.
Not only do they not think there was comedy, they're angry that comedy is happening.
They want to be celebrating their win.
And they're being told to shut up, and they're the regulars, and you're not. It's a terrible situation for everyone.
Oh, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's no. Are you going? You mentioned Acme. I know that some folks are doing shows at Acme. Are you doing the road at all? Are you doing any of these? Gigs?
I got an email from Lewis yesterday, and it's the first time anyone's asked me to do a gig since March.
Okay.
And I have been Mr. Hunker Down. We went nowhere. I haven't been at a grocery store in 6 months. I mean, we have anchored the end of the spectrum of hunkering down.
Okay.
And I haven't done a single thing, but I'm actually thinking of saying yes to this one.
Really?
Yeah, because I've missed it a lot. And it's not just, it's so much more than the money. It's the process of being a comic that has been ripped from me, and I miss it in a way that's much greater than I even thought I would.
I 100% agree with you. Although I do not miss any of the travel. I do not miss any of the stress of setting the alarm for 4:30 in the morning and getting in my car and going to the airport and all that BS, and then being exhausted. And then, hey, don't forget we're going to pick you up at 5:30 for radio. Like, I don't miss any of that.
Right.
But I'm with you. Like that stage, I miss that aspect of it. and I'm with you. Like, yes, I would like the money because that's how we pay our bills.
Yes, that would be good too. Don't misunderstand.
No, but
But I knew that I was in for a financially brutal year, but I didn't know, and I knew I would miss stand up. I'm not new to that concept, but I really miss I miss all the trappings of the whole thing, the
yeah.
working on a joke and running the joke and practicing the joke and doing the joke and tweaking the joke and shaking the hands and talking to the people after, and the quiet after the show, and the staff is kind of cleaning up, and that surfing the moment with them. And there's this, and I even miss some of the travel part, like that, the idea of, there's a cowboy aspect of, I got to get these cows to
Yeah.
to use your city. Like there's a thing that has to be done, and I'm the only one who could do it in this moment, in this time, and I'm going to go do the damn best job I can. There's a beauty to that, and I've been doing it so long that it's a part of my fibers, and to
Right.
not be able to do it at all has really hurt my feelings,
It's well, you know what? You should take it personally. I'm glad it's hurting your feelings because I believe this was all people were just tired of your football puns, and they said we got to do something to stop this nightmare. And somebody said, "Well, release a bat. That'll solve this." By the way, I have never worked Wichita, so whenever I use Wichita as the example, it's because I've never been there. So I have
How
nothing
is that
against
possible?
Wichita.
All of your days,
I don't know.
you could drive there from Chicago. What do you mean you never worked at Wichita?
Never worked Wichita. I'm sure somebody's going to say, "Well, that's not true. I saw you there in 1992, and you sucked in front of so and so." Hey, so are you going to fly or are you going to drive to
I don't
Minneapolis?
know. I'm probably not going to say yes yet, but I want to.
Yeah.
We are in Atlanta and we drove because we didn't want to fly.
Smart. So it's
We
all
got a
all three of you
2-year-old
drove
and a
across
dog.
country?
We didn't want to be going through an airport with a thing and a child and so we
How
drove.
did you stay at hotels on the way or did you?
We did.
You did.
And that, having done it now, I think is broadly okay.
Okay.
I'm not as, I mean, that's low-ish on the list of things to worry about, in my opinion, as we speak today.
Okay.
There's not a lot of people, you're not interacting, there's plenty of distance everywhere. You wipe down the things when you go in, and
Right.
in our case, we even brought our own pillows, and like, I don't think a hotel is in the top 10 concerns,
I think you're probably right too, and I think that they are probably going overboard with the cleaning to make sure, like, the last thing the Holiday Inn in Wichita wants is for somebody to go, "Hey, I got it there." You know what I mean?
It's ground zero of the new flare-up. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I'm with you. And I know a lot of people that are flying, and but I am not ready for that. I'm not ready to go to the airport, and even if I have my own row, I don't know.
I agree. I don't want to do it either. If we stay in Atlanta, now suddenly things are more drivable than they were. So that's possible. I don't know how long we're going to be here.
Walk me through this, because I saw that you were driving to Atlanta. I didn't know you were staying in Atlanta. Are you no longer have a place here in Los Angeles?
No, but we fully intend to come back. So because there were several factors, the daughter and the thing and the travel and the no school and a brick and mortar place and the other small kid, and we needed to change homes anyway.
Okay.
So we put our stuff in a pod so that we can temporarily take an extended trip to see the grandmothers and see some family and spend some time. And then we're coming back to LA and to a new place that will have the pod deliver the things to. So.
Oh, great.
That's the short version.
And when is the plan on that? Like maybe like mid 2021, or are you going to come back before then? Like,
oh, probably long before that, but we're totally flexible. That's the advantage of the pod. So we'll see.
All right. I don't know anything about the pods. Are pods expensive?
No, they're weirdly not. If you move and leave them there for a long time, it would be expensive because you're paying per month.
Right.
But they actually don't have a fee to deliver them or to pick them up, as long as you have a minimum kind of a 3-month sort of thing.
Huh.
And they'll deliver them anywhere. Like, whatever, the world changed and we decided we wanted to move to Atlanta or Alaska, they would bring our stuff there. It's kind of magical.
Wow, that's craziness.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with the pod. Sounds great.
Sponsor here. The pod was great. And the pod actually has amazing technology. It's like no one cares about this. I'll do this in 20 seconds.
I care.
the truck shows up and it's like a regular big ass, tractor trailer, right? And then they have these things on the corners that actually have wheels on them, and they come down and they separate out from the truck, and then they pick the pod up and the truck drives out from under it and they set it down wherever they want. It's amazing. Maybe I didn't pitch it well enough.
I don't know what happened. I got lost somewhere. I think the imagery confused me. So the pod is
like when you work a ship or in an airport and there's this sea of tractor trailer containers that they're putting on a ship.
I got you.
It's one of those that they bring to your house and you fill it up and they pick it up the next day and take it away.
And then by your description, the truck,
and you would like
the truck, the truck starts flying. That's how you described it. It sounds like the truck starts flying.
They lift the thing, and then the truck is a flat truck underneath, and it pulls away and leaves the thing hanging there. And then they drive it with these mechanics to your parking space or your driveway or whatever.
I got you. Okay.
I didn't expect to talk about that.
I apologize.
And now I know why it wasn't on my list of questions.
I would, you said that you like working on the bits. I would work on that story. I would really tighten that one up. I think there's something there.
I want to do over. I'm going to go and sit in the car and cry now, just like the old days.
No. The worst. The worst. Oh my God, that show is horrible. It's horrible. Where you have a heckler and they win. You know what I mean? It's like one of those, the worst.
Because they're right. When they yell, "You suck," and everyone agrees. That's when you.
Oh my God. Another one. It reminded me of one I was doing it in Dubuque, Iowa, and I was having just it was a bachelor party who just could not have been convinced. But the woman at the door on the phone told them, "Do not bring a bachelor party. That is, you think it's fun. It's not fun." She's like, "No, I'm going to bring him. He loves comedy." She's like, "I wouldn't do it." They bring him. Of course, they hate it. They're ruining the show. And they all had on, of course, he had like a bachelor hat on, or like they had these crazy, but it was like a captain hat. And I'm getting heckled. And again, this in Dubuque, maybe this is a lot later into my career than it should have been, late 90s. And I'm bombing. They hate me. They're winning. The hecklers are winning. One of the hecklers says something else, the guy in the hat, and another guy, African-American guy, just goes, "Sit down, Gilligan." And the bachelor sits down, and the guy in the audience got the biggest laugh of the entire show. And it was like, that guy, the guy defending me won. Like, I don't even equate. I'm third in line in this goddamn thing. It's the worst. Sit down, Gilligan.
He's on your team. At least shutting down the jackass was
true.
Hit in the room.
That's a good point. I never looked at it that way. At least he was defending me. He could have gone the other way. Like, yeah, you're right. Get off.
That hurts way more. Yeah.
Oh God. But it was just still was so pathetic. And then, hiding in the office afterwards, hoping nobody wants to say hello and hoping nobody was at that show. You know what I mean? Like one of those. That's the one you came to? Oh Christ.
That's the one they came to is the most. That's the thing that non-comics will never fully understand. Like, you could do 7 shows in the week and kill and do well and do pretty well and do quite well and well, and then the Sunday show, and that's the one the owner of the club sees.
Right.
He can't know you're good. It's not possible for him to think you're good.
Yeah, I saw, I had a great week in, was it Houston? It was Chip Chinnery and I were working in Houston, and we're having a great, every night we'd go home and,
come on, you get that?
Yes, of course I do. We would go back to the condo every night going, "Hey, another great show." Like, we were so excited with how well we were doing, or how we were having great shows in front of these jammed rooms. And then sure enough, Sunday night, the owner's there and the show was just,
Yeah.
And, my agent gets a call a couple days later going, "Yeah, it just was a horrible week." Horrible week? It was one okay show. It wasn't even a bad show. And
I had that with Dave Stroop. I killed all week, and then Sunday I was fucking around and working on jokes, and it was a weird crowd, and I was like, I was floating on having killed the whole weekend.
Right.
And I found out after my set that was the only show he saw. He didn't book me for 10 years.
Wow, that is a club that I have not worked at in over a decade or so because of a similar situation.
And I finally came back and I did a set like on a Tuesday, and he was like, "Wow, you've really improved." I was like, "Dave, I didn't suck the last time you saw me."
Right. Yeah. The last word I got was, yeah, I can't book Pardo. He's too hit and miss. And every owner goes, nope, you're wrong. He's every show's a home run. Some of them are grand slams, but they're all home runs. Yeah, I can't take that risk. Great. Fine. The only people you're hurting are the people of Columbus. You're just hurting the fans in that town.
Business is crazy.
Yeah.
I got to let you go soon, but I want you to tell me a little bit about being a warm-up guy for Conan. That seems like a challenging gig.
It was the greatest. I did it I did the 9 months at NBC for The Tonight Show. Then we all got fired because Jay Leno wanted his job back and somebody thought that was a good idea. And
very nice way to say that.
Yeah, those headlines, I got to read them themselves, Kostaki. We then had the little time off. Then we all went back to work at TBS, and I was lucky enough that I was one of the people that, he brought along with him. And I did not know Conan very well. I didn't meet him until the day that I interviewed for the job, which was 2 days before we started The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien. Wow. And I'm very grateful that he took an instant liking to me. And I wasn't good at the job, to be honest with you, at TBS. I was kind of doing an impression of a warm-up. And I was able to find, just like we are with comics, you're not good when you start, and then you find your footing. And, by the time we were left TBS, I think I figured it out. And then, I'm sorry, by the time we left NBC, I think I figured it out. And then we were gone. Right. And then when we came back on TBS, it was like, I took everything that I learned in those months at NBC. And also Conan was a folk hero at that point, coming back on TBS. And, the crowds were rabid. They were just excited that Conan was back on TV, and here we go. So like I was walking out to these just, appreciative crowds from the get-go. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, that's cool to hear.
So it was great for a long while. And then the audiences kind of changed, in my opinion. And it wasn't as easy as it was initially. Huh. And there would be times where, like, I would come off and Conan would go, "How's the crowd?" I go, "They did not care for me. At the end of the day, it didn't matter if they hated me and loved him. That's a win. That's all. Right. Yeah, I did my job. But there would be some shows where they wouldn't like me, and then they wouldn't like him, and then that's awful.
You're the canary in the coal mine. If it's not well for Pardo, like, oh, it's going to be a tough one.
And Conan appreciated, like, and I would say, yeah, that's a rough one, man. And so then he knew to bob and weave, and just like we do as headliners, like, hey, that tables could be this, that table could be that, so know it going in where the hot spots are. But I was very, very, it was a gig that I didn't think I wanted, because I didn't want to be a warm-up comic. I didn't move here to be a warm-up, and but I'm very grateful that I got the job. And then as time went on, my agent, my personal appearance agent, TJ, said, once they see how funny you are, they're going to give you more to do. And I was like, oh, okay. I just hope they don't fire me from this one. And then sure enough, it worked. And then I started doing remotes for them. I started being in some sketches. I filled in for Andy Richter as co-host a couple of times. Yeah. They had me on as a guest every 6 months. Like, he really embraced me. And so it is without any sort of hyperbole that he really, really helped my career. Like, he really made, he made my podcast more successful because I was able to relax and make that great. He made my stand-up better because I wasn't stressed out about every show going well and getting rebooked. Like, I could just, and when you're not stressed out, you're funnier. So, and then here's this Conan O'Brien, maybe one of the funniest men on the planet, who thinks I'm the funniest guy in the world. So, it was, I left there in 2015 because I got a job, and it was just time for it was time for me to leave the nest, and it was time for, and I got a gig hosting on the Science Channel that sadly only went one season, but it was time. But I miss it. I miss every second of going to that Warner Brothers stage and hanging out with the writers who are some of the funniest people in the world. And and I miss all of that. And honest to God, I don't necessarily miss the warm-up aspect of it, but if they called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, we're going back into production October 1st. Would you want to return?" You goddamn right I do.
Yeah, right.
That's I miss all the
camaraderie. It's a good experience there. Yeah. We have mutual friends who work there, and I've always, Conan's one of those, he's one of the real mensches of the comedy universe.
Yeah.
People don't know that about him, but he's, he paid people he's just been good to the whole process.
Dude, I had worked, I did not meet, I knew Andy Richter a little bit from some shows at the UCB. I knew Brian Kiley because I worked with him in Indianapolis in 1991. And so here it is what was it, 2009. I go to this interview to get the job. I don't know anybody. 8 months, 9 months later, we're all fired. They don't know me. I'm nobody. And they paid me as if I was one of the people that moved out here from New York. Like, they took care of me because they were like, well, you didn't, it's no fault of yours that you're out of a job. We're going to take care of you. And it was like, I was a local hire. They had no reason to do that. And they did it. So
yeah, that's great. That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, in show business is so rude and ruthless and impersonal sometimes. It's so nice to hear that kind of a story,
Oh, it's again, I've had my own shows where I wasn't treated as well as I was at Conan. And,
right. That's so cool.
I miss that.
It's great to talk to you, Jimmy. Let's tell some people some of the things. Never Not Funny. If you're not listening to that podcast, then you're dumb. So rectify that immediately. You've got a show coming up live. It's flapperscomedy.com. It's this Friday. Is that right?
This Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific. And I'm calling these kind of Jimmy Pardo Unplugged or an acoustic evening with Jimmy Pardo. What I do is I see the little square on the Zoom, and I say, hey, what's your story? And I do a little quote unquote crowd work with them, which is really just me talking to them. And then I have them request a favorite story or bit of mine. And then, so it's kind of an all request show.
Nice.
And last time I did it, I went in very cautiously and ended up doing 90 minutes instead of 60. And it was, I make no promises this time that it's going to go that long, but it was great fun. And if I didn't remember the story, I got to laugh at them telling it back to me or floundering through it. And it was all kind of the vibe of it. So I'm looking forward to doing it again this Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific time at flapperscomedy.com.
Well, that's a hell of a pitch. I want to see that myself. That's great.
It's fun. It was fun.
You're great, Jimmy. It's great to talk to you, man.
As are you, man. And when you're back in town, please let me know. Well, I mean, look, we'll be in touch before that, but I'm really flattered that you had me be part of this.
Thanks for building a whole pandemic just so you didn't have to have lunch with me. Is this what you're doing?
And again, if I got to see one more Ravens joke, I'm gonna. So again, the pandemic had to happen.
Good closer. Thanks, buddy.
Pal. Thank you for having me.